What's up everybody, Connor with Barnes 4-Wheel Drive here. We are going to be taking you through a series where we work on this XJ of ours. This was our XJ where we were testing a lot of product on it. We designed our coil spring conversion for the rear, our link kit for the front, and now we're ready to build it. So we're going to kind of take you through that, show you some tips and tricks that we've learned through the years. We're going to be putting JK Rubicon axles in it. This is the front axle. We've got the rear one over here. They've been re-geared to 488 and they have the factory locker in them. Our buddy Chris Durham built these for us, and yeah, we're going to put the truss kits on them. We're going to install them. We're going to show you how to, set all that up and just take you along as we do that. This XJ has seen better days. There's some things that need to be fixed on it. It's got clear coat missing, the headliner's sagging, it kind of smells funny inside, but we're going to fix all that throughout this series, and hopefully by the end of it we've got a really cool wheeling rig. And yeah, we're going to take you along with us. All right, so first up in this series is going to be how to install an axle truss. This is going to be a general video for all of our axle trusses. I'm going to kind of try to show you some tips and tricks that you might not get from the instructions we supply, or internet people or whatever. All of our axle trusses are going to come with instructions. We typically don't print them and give them to you because they're easily accessible online, and you can just pull them up on your phone as you're working on your axle or whatever, and it's super easy to do and saves a ton of paper. But yeah, all your axle swap kits will have step-by-step instructions on how to put this on this vehicle, what you need to cut off, what you need to weld on, yada yada yada, how to do it. We're going to remove everything except for these upper control arm mounts. Believe it or not, they actually work on an XJ, so that's what we're going to do first. And in this instance, I'm going to use a plasma cutter. I don't have a plasma cutter at home. I've built Jeeps without plasma cutters. If you're doing it with a grinder, yes, it's not going to be the funnest job in the world, but you can knock it out in like a day. Just get it over with. I'm going to use this plasma cutter to make my life a little bit easier, and I'm going to come in after and clean it up with a grinder. And a lot of times, especially on really thick stuff, you'll have this really big, plasma cut booger here. Once, this was at a really weird angle, so I couldn't come in here and get it, perfectly flat. That's why it looks like this. So now, after that, I'm gonna come in after this and kind of lay my plasma torch right here and try to clean that up some more, just to save me some time from, having to grind this down with a grinder disc. All right, so we've got most of the brackets cut off with the plasma. Now I'm just going back and smoothing these down with my grinder. Just using a regular old grinder with a aggressive grit on a flap wheel. And big pro tip here, do not grind side to side like this. Grind with the axle tube going up and down. If you grind side to side, it's going to create a lot of flat spots in your axle tube. Just going to look bad, be weird to weld to later. So go up and down with the tube, get it smooth, and we're just going to smooth this out, and then it'll be ready for the truss. All right, we've got our axle fully stripped, grinded down, smooth. So now we're getting to the truss itself. So if you ever order a truss from us, you'll probably get a box that looks something like this. Big box, a bunch of metal parts in it. Go through your truss, make sure you've got everything. If you don't, reach out to us. We will help you out there. We're gonna start assembling it. So as per the instructions, step one in this guy is to clean the axle off. We've already done that. Step two, assemble the passenger side truss top to the coil brace, which are these guys here. I'm going to tack weld this to the truss top itself, and then we are going to just keep puzzling it together. All of our trusses are keyed, so they have, you can see this little tab that sticks up off of here, and then they just insert into the truss itself. The truss has a little hole cut in it, and yeah, it just goes together kind of like Legos. So we're going to start tacking this together and getting it put on the axle. All right, so we get a lot of questions about welders and welder settings when it comes to welding up a truss. That question is pretty hard to answer because all welders are a little bit different in how you set them up. Some of them have smart settings like this ESOB Rebel we have. My welder at home is titanium from Harbor Freight. It does not. It has a little chart on the inside. Most welders have. You just pop this open, flip it up. They have a chart right here on the inside that tells you exactly what to set your welder to depending on what thickness and gas and wire diameter you're using. In this scenario, we're using 0.35, 0.035 wire. We're just putting the ESOB in Smart MIG, and I've got it set to 1/4 inch because that's what we're welding, and it does pretty good. Basically, we always tell people to set it to whatever the welder's default is for that material thickness, and then just kind of move it around from there. If you're welding it, seems like it's a little cold, turn it up a little bit. Seems a little hot, turn it down a little bit. Most welders, the base setting is pretty good, and then you just kind of fine tune it from there. All right guys, so the first step in this kit is to install the passenger side coil brace into the truss top. So that's what I'm going to do. Just like you, I have never actually installed this exact truss kit before. I've done some other ones from us, but I haven't done this one. So we key all these specifically to where they will only fit in one part of the truss, so you can't get them confused. So we're just going to pop this in there just like that, and now we just got to tack it in place on each side here and just make sure it doesn't move. Tack that down. That first tack sounded terrible, so that's why I did a second one. And this side, we're going to come over here. Tack that down. Welder isn't sounding too hot, so I might have to adjust a setting or two, but when you're setting these up, that's really all you want to do. You don't want to go too hard on the tack welds. You're going to get it tacked, get it set up, and then move along. All right, so now that we've got this little piece tacked in, we are going to start just kind of assembling this all together. Again, follow your instructions step by step. You'll see it says install these 6 side plates, so that's what we're going to do. And again, each one of these tabs here, like on the top of this and then on the top of this right here, is a different size, so you can't put this together wrong. Like, see, this goes right here on this side. I can't physically fit it on this side. The tabs are a different space and they're a different size, so they don't line up. So we want to make this as easy as possible for you guys. And we've got 2 little side pieces here. Again, they will only go in one way, so like I can't put this one in over here, it doesn't fit. So that's a really nice thing that our design team here does to ensure that you aren't doing this wrong. And then we've got these center gussets that come with pretty much all of our truss kits here. So they're just going to go in here, and they're going to kind of, you got to shimmy them down in there like that. So then not only does that brace these guys here, but it is what sits on the axle tube nice and good. So now we're just going to tack all these together. And again, you're going to want to kind of make sure these are square-ish. You don't want it to be all like cattywampus out of position. Now this is all tacked together here. We have completed step 3, so we're going to move on to step 4. All right guys, again, following our instructions, follow along on your phone. We are moved on to step 4 and kind of step 5 as well, which is our coil spring locators. So our coil spring locators are super cool, super easy to install. These are pretty much going to be the same no matter what truss you get from us. They might look a little bit different as far as size goes, but they're pretty much going to be the same. What we tell you to do here is two kind of important things. One, you're going to take this guy, again, got a little tab on the bottom of it. It's going to go right here in this hole, ba-bam, and you're going to line it up to the edge of this, and then boom, that's all you got to do. It's in the right spot.
we're gonna weld the inside of this. So then our coil spring has a nice smooth outer edge to, you know, mate with. Then this is its cap. So this is gonna go on top here, like so, once everything's said and done. But what we wanna do before that is we're gonna take this little 3/8 16 nut and we're gonna weld it on the bottom. The reason we're gonna do that is because then you're gonna have a nice little threaded spot for a bump stop extension or a bump stop pad, whatever you want to do. Don't forget that. It's gonna suck if you forget it. We're gonna weld this nut on the bottom side of this, and then we're actually gonna fully weld this right now. It doesn't hurt anything to go ahead and fully weld it. And once you put this cap on here, you actually are not gonna be able to get in here. So we're gonna go ahead, tack this where we want it, and then do a nice full pass on the inside. Got that welded on. Just two pretty good, like, beefy looking welds, nothing too fancy. All right, now we got to weld our coil cap on here. So this guy that we welded that nut to, he lays on top of this, and we're gonna weld it on. Okay, internet, don't roast me. I'm not a professional welder, so let's all just keep that in mind.
All right, so we got all this part of the truss tacked together now. We have kind of sat it on the axle, shimmied it around, got it in place. I clamped it down on two sides here, you know, to make sure it stays in position as I'm, you know, tacking it down. Big thing with axles is no matter who you're buying a truss from, you're going to have variations in the casting. It's just something that happens. This Dana 44 that Jeep made, they made thousands of them, and some of them have some variations in the center section, or right here where the tube meets the center section, you know, stuff like that. So you might have some small areas where you might have to take a flat disc and grind it down. I had one right here where the tube met the center section. I had to ground a little bit out of the truss there, like I probably ground a 1/4 inch out of it. Not a big deal. It's something that, you know, you kind of can't account for and you might run into. So keep an eye out for that. But once you get it on here, I like to just kind of clamp them down, make sure they're in place. And then we're going to kind of just go around, tack this thing all over the tube as the instructions state, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, holding the mic just to make things easier for me right now. But another thing is once you get this truss on here, two pro tips for you. The first thing you're going to want to do is while this is on here, you're going to want to mark everywhere this thing's touching, because you're going to need to grind the paint off of this axle to, you know, get a good weld and everything like that. Another thing is take this truss off and spray it with some sort of weldable primer or something on the underside. That's going to help prevent rust on the underside of this thing, because once you weld it on here, you're not going to get paint up underneath this truss. So you definitely want to do that. If you don't do that, what you'll notice is, you know, the outside of your truss will look great after you paint it, and then you'll just have these weird spots of like flash rust when you go through snow and rain and stuff like that. So make sure you paint the underside of the truss. It's a big pro tip there. So this is the exact same thing that we did before, so I'm not going to go too in depth on walking you through it. We're just going to take the same steps that we did on the other side to get the last coil base ready. Yeah, should be pretty straightforward. So one cool part about our truss kits as well, you can see I've got this coil base all welded on, and you can see there's this cutout along the side of it and then a little notch right here. What that is for you to knock this down, and then your coil spring's actually going to seat inside of that. I typically will just take a hammer with like a little punch or a screwdriver or something. You can just give it like 2 little love taps. Basically want to turn it over, and you want the top edge of the coil little spring piece here to be in line with the top of this base. It explains it in that instruction there. And then you're just going to lay a little bead of weld here, and boom, then you got a cool little coil retainer and your coil's not gonna pop out. Flip it over and see now, we've got our coil base. So this is where your bump stop's gonna bolt into and everything. And then you've got a nice little coil spring seat right there. So you can twist the coil into this. It's gonna seat really nice without coming out. All right guys, so we've got everything tacked together at this point. We're ready to put this on. And yeah, that's pretty much all we've got to do at this point. We're gonna tack it all the way around. You're gonna want some pretty substantial tacks on these kind of truss kits and stuff, because we're gonna be putting a lot of heat into this, you know, and we're gonna try to spread it throughout the axle. But you don't want to put tiny little tack welds and, you know, it pop up off of the tube and stuff. So, you know, nothing crazy, but, you know, just some good tacks around. This truss does not require you to set a pinion angle with it or level it in any way, because this truss locates on this upper control arm mount here. So you're just going to sit it up to where it's butting up against the back of this control arm mount, and that's where it needs to go. We already built that into this one. Some of them you have to put an angle finder up here on the top and, you know, rotate them and level them out. We do actually have to do that on this side. So we're going to install this one, and whatever the angle is on the top of this here truss, we're going to match that same angle over here. I've got this clamped, as you can see, just to kind of hold it in place so I know it doesn't move anywhere. I've got it where I want it. That shouldn't be going anywhere. All right, so now we've moved over to this side. I've got this side tacked on. Literally, what I'm gonna do, you can use any kind of angle finder you want. If you have a dedicated digital angle finder, like I have one of those at my house, I'm literally just gonna use my phone. And this is telling me we are at 10 degrees on the top of that truss. So I'm literally just gonna sit this here and get this to 10 degrees, and then I'm gonna tack this on. And again, you know, if this is your first time doing something like this, don't hesitate too much about things. If you're tack welding stuff, you can always, you know, break those tacks, redo. So I clamped this down just to make sure it stays where I wanted it to, and I'm gonna try to snake in here and sweet. Truss is tacked on. Okay, now that the truss is welded on, we're actually going to get to installing some of these brackets. This kit does technically come with a steering stabilizer mount. I'm not going to use this because we are going to be doing hydro assist more than likely, and I don't think I want this to be here. But if you have a stock steering stabilizer or whatever, this is a great mount. I'm just going to move on to installing the track bar bracket. So it's got a little cutout right here. Pretty much only one way it can go on. Butt it up against the tube, butt it up against the bracket, and you're ready to weld it together, son. Now our track bar bracket is hanging out in place. All right, we're going handheld here just so I can show you what we got going on. Something really cool in our truss kits, especially in these TJ, like XJ swap kits. This guy right here, so we send you this piece of tubing that is cut exactly to a 1/2 inch. Put this bolt in, you bolt these two tabs on this piece of tubing, and then I just knocked these in here. You can see they're still loose, they can still move around. So you just take your hammer, tap these guys in there like that. This kit says this needs to be a 1/4 inch away from the edge of this, just like you can see in the instructions here. And then boom, we've got a shock mount. Hello, testing. Okay. All right, guys, it is a new day, obviously, as I have a new shirt on, but I got this truss fully welded on. I spared you some of the footage of that because I didn't want you to watch a ton of me just welding over and over again. But yeah, it only took me about a couple hours or so to get everything fully welded. Just again, pro tip, as you're doing this and fully welding this on, try to disperse that heat a bit and spread around, you know, weld a bead over here, weld a bead over there. You don't want to focus in one area, or you could potentially warp something. But if you spread around, it really doesn't put too much heat into the axle, and we haven't really seen that to be ever an issue for anybody. So now, a question that I'm sure plenty of you are going to have after watching this video is, why didn't you weld to the cast? Now, this is kind of a big debate throughout the off-road world, but from what we've found and what we've experienced, we don't really find it beneficial to weld a truss to the cast iron center section. Most center sections are made out of cast iron or nodular iron, and that material is not the best when it comes to mating a piece of mild steel, which is what a truss would be made out of, to it. It's very porous. The best way, like a very simple way to describe it is, when you're welding to mild steel, you're welding to a very flat piece of material that the weld can really like seep into, if that makes sense. Whereas when you're welding to nodular or cast iron, it's almost like it's a grainy material, and so your weld is kind of sitting on the top of those grains and not really fully mating with that material. 9 times out of 10, if let's say you do have some sort of failure, your weld cracks or whatever, we have never found a situation or scenario where we thought, if this had been welded to the cast iron, that would have saved it. It's never really happened. It is kind of brittle and it breaks like an egg. So if you were to have a failure, and let's say we had a truss that went all the way up over this and it was welded to it, and let's say you have the failure and it breaks the cast iron, it's not just going to break a little piece of it, it's going to rip a huge chunk out of the differential. All of our trusses, we design them to have a ton of weld surface to the actual tubes, which are made out of mild steel. We have never seen a scenario where a truss was set up correctly, welded properly, where it really needed to be welded to the cast iron. So that's just to answer that question. I figured that would be getting asked in the comment section. Yeah, guys, again, we just wanted this to be kind of a raw, basic how-to on how to install a truss. We just wanted to answer some questions that we get asked a lot on the phone. This wasn't a specific install on this exact truss. We try to make it as foolproof and as easy as possible so you can take your rig to the next level. So follow the instructions that your truss came with, follow some of the tips we gave you in this video, and you should be rock and rolling in no time. But yeah, like I said, we're going to be making some content around this XJ, so keep the eye out for that. Got to do some pretty cool upgrades to it and try to take it to this next show season that's coming up for us. And yeah, it's going to be pretty fun. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.